Welcome to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans. My name is Eric, and I am in charge today.
My name is Sara, and I am letting him think he's in charge today.
Yes. What can I say?
Kind of like Remington. He's the face. He fits the suit, and
Okay. I'm the boss. You're in charge. Got it. I got it.
You walked into that just.
Oh,
right
I sure did. Anyway, today, right now, this episode, season 2, episode 20, Hounded Steele.
Wookiees.
Yes.
I had to do it. I'm sorry.
Hey, before we get into the episode, we've got the Steele Watchers Facebook group, which we are part of. It's not our official group, but that's the group that we promote. And the great thing about them is that there's all this information that comes to us through them.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember back in Small Town Steele, near the end, you had commented about how...
Yes, the face.
Brosnan's, his face. Yeah. And somebody listening to the episode for that episode of the podcast chimed in and gave us an explanation. Apparently, during the filming of LG in Steele, Brosnan contracted Bell's palsy. I guess the popular opinion is that he got it sometime while they were shooting the water scenes.
Which makes sense because that water looked nasty.
Yeah, and from what I understand, that is one of the more commonly suspected sources of the condition, ultimately the condition. I went and looked it up, and from the MayoClinic.org. Anyway, Bell's palsy is a condition that causes sudden weakness in the muscles on one side of the face. Often the weakness is short-term and improves over weeks. The weakness makes half of the face appear to droop, smiles are one-sided, and the eye on the affected side is hard to close. It can occur at any age. The exact cause is not known. Experts think it's caused by swelling and irritation of nerves that control the muscles on one side of the face. And it could be caused by a reaction that occurs after a viral infection. Symptoms usually start to improve within a few weeks, with complete recovery in about 6 months. A small number of people continue to have some Bell's palsy symptoms for life, and rarely does Bell's palsy occur more than once. So, viral infection. Yeah, if he was playing in that water.
That water was pretty gross.
That seems like a good possibility.
It was pretty gross. And it was really funny because... Like I said, I guess it's because we're watching these episodes so closely and making notes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would have noticed I definitely didn't notice before anytime I'd watched that episode. But then watching it and making the notes, his face is kind of like there's a weird thing happening with the one side of his face. And then, like you said, someone posted and I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't crazy. I was definitely, and apparently that continued a little bit into Molten as well. And I did notice it, but it wasn't as pronounced. So
yeah. So great thing about the group. So if somebody is out there listening to us and they're not a member of that group, go find it. You can find the links for it in our show notes.
There's people there that know far more than we do. So it's a great resource because we just know anytime we say something and like screw up or make a mistake or we don't know something, somebody there will and they'll tell us.
Yeah.
So it's
and yes, of course, there are people who know more about Steele than we do because we have a member in the group that wrote the book.
Literally wrote
on
the
Remington
book on it.
Steele.
Yeah.
Literally, yes. So, and we steal from her all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get on to the episode. Hounded Steele, first aired on May 15th, 1984, was written by Jeff Melvoin and directed by Don Weiss.
Yay, Jeff.
Yay.
Jeff of Stop That Carrot fame.
Yes. Anyway, as far as the synopsis goes, I did another kind of grafting event. So we're going to go with the official Steele Watchers version of the synopsis, which goes, Mildred's moonlighting as a detective inadvertently uncovers a bizarre plot involving a priceless diamond and a famous retired international master jewel thief. I took kind of bits and pieces from the TV guide and the DVD liner notes. So
That's fair.
I'll read the other two. TV Guide, Mildred's moonlighting as a detective turns up a dead Interpol agent and puts Laura and Steele on the trail of an international master thief. Yeah, okay. DVD liner notes, Laura and Remington come to the rescue after Mildred inadvertently uncovers a bizarre plot involving a priceless diamond and a famous retired jewel thief. There were elements of both of those that I liked and things that I thought both left out. So that's why I did the surgery.
Did you recognize the actor that plays the Interpol agent? Did he ping for you?
You know what I've got throughout my entire notes?
What?
Doctor Who does this.
Okay.
Doctor Who does that.
That's what I have in my notes. I literally have listed him as the doctor in my notes. Oh my God.
Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, the man who played the villain in this,
yeah,
he played what, like the third or the fourth Doctor
He's
Who?
the fourth Doctor, yeah.
Fourth, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, Tom Baker. Tom Baker is the actor, and it's funny because like I kept writing the doctor does this or the doctor does that, and there's one moment where the producers had to know, and when you get there, if you didn't notice it, I'll definitely jump in and point it out. But there's one moment where it's, to me, I could just be misreading it, but it feels like a giant wink to the audience.
Okay.
And yeah,
I probably missed it.
Okay. Well, when you get there, I'll tell you. I don't want to jump the gun because it's quite, I found it really funny, but yeah, it was like, oh, the doctor's here. Where's the scarf?
Well, yeah, for so much of the episode, we don't get his name.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just typing the doctor. It's easier. And then I just kept going with it. I was like, you know what?
So that's what I did. I did the same thing. Anyways, so the episode begins with shots of a taxi cab driving through various highways and finally arriving at the Shady Rest Hotel. I'm sorry, the Sleepy Rest Hotel. I'm sorry, I'm thinking Petticoat Junction.
Is it sleepy though? Because I don't know if you'd be getting the sleepiest or restiest experience in this hotel.
No, you wouldn't. But then again, there's a lot of motels that advertise.
That's fair. That is fair.
Qualities for their hotel that, yeah, no, you don't get them.
I had a question for you actually for this opening sequence, because the score in this episode, is it just this episode that it's used in, or is it used in other episodes? Because it sticks in my head and I love it, but I have it's one of those scores that just stands out, and I don't know if it's standing out because it's just that good or if they've reused it.
I didn't really pay attention to the score.
Well, if anybody else knows, please let me know, because I am that nerd that pays attention to all the scores. And when I was younger, I used to, with Napster, no less, get onto the internet and download TV and movie scores for like all the shows that I watched. So
it's funny because when I'm watching a TV show or watching a movie, I really don't focus on the music. I try and just focus on the episode or the movie itself. But at the same time, I'm kind of like you in that I do love the music. And so I go out and buy movie soundtracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got the soundtracks for a number of I've acquired, don't ask details. I won't go into details.
The high seas.
Somebody might be listening. All the scores, soundtracks, and a lot of the complete scores for the Star Trek movies, the Star Wars, a lot of the Star Trek TV show episodes. I love that music because it combines a more traditional classical music.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't know, there's so much of classical music that is hard to listen to for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm the same way. I love to collect the soundtracks and the scores to listen to them, but I don't listen to them when I'm watching the shows. So,
well, if anybody knows with regards to this one, if it's just me, like, because I like it so much, or if it's like, I have a feeling it was used in other episodes. So I'm just curious. All right. Sorry.
Well, that's usually what happens is that they have certain stock themes that they can just, they don't even re-record them. They just drop them in.
Yeah.
And then there's other themes that they do new arrangements and versions of for the episode because they make it unique to that episode for some reason. But yeah, a lot of action scene themes from shows like Star Trek. You'll hear the same music over and over again. So
yeah, that's true.
Anyway, so as we get to the motel, the cab pulls up in front of one of the cabins, and Mildred gets out. She's not impressed with the motel, declaring to the cab driver that it looks like it's about as restful as a split lip.
Good line.
Yeah. She pulls a piece of paper from her purse and instructs the driver to wait for her, and then walks over to a cabin and then knocks on the door. Inside the cabin, a dog starts barking. She knocks again, and the barking continues. After a moment, she, because nobody's answered, makes her way to the back of the cabin, finds a window with a partially open curtain, peers in, and sees a smallish black dog on the bed, a rope tied to his collar. As the barking continues, Mildred puts a finger to her lips to shush the dog. Yeah, like dogs really.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too, because I had a horrible flashback with this motel room because the green shag carpeting was the exact same carpet that was in my parents' bedroom when I was a kid. It was hideous then, and it's hideous in this episode too. And I was just looking at it going, oh God, we had that carpet. But yeah, shushing a dog.
That used to be the height of fashion in your home.
You know what the worst
shag
thing
carpet
is that my sister and I are both severe asthmatics. That is the worst carpet that you could have for an asthmatic because it traps everything in it. So all the dust and everything get like, no wonder we couldn't breathe half the time. The carpet was suffocating us.
So anyway, fortunately for Mildred, the window is not secure. So she raises up the lower sash, and then after a bit of fumbling and dropping the sash on her arm, she climbs in through the window, although the window sash continues to battle against her intrusion into the room. She finally manages to fall through the window, gets to her feet, moves to the bed, where she releases the dog from his tether. But as she's returning to the window to make her exit, she hears a sound. It's somebody at the front door. It's a key being slipped into the lock. In a panic, she tosses the dog out the window, hollering, "Cheese it!" Then we see Doctor Who come through the window, or come through the door.
Yeah. My notes read, as Doctor Who, I mean the man, comes back into the room.
I didn't even do that. I just kept saying the doctor.
Nah, well, after that, I didn't either, but just had to.
Anyway, he comes through the door, pulls out a gun, and begins shooting as Mildred dives out the window after the dog. Back out front, the cab driver, who has apparently decided that discretion and his absence would be the better part of valor, starts his cab, peels out, and leaves Mildred chasing him, shouting, "I told you to wait. I'll have your green card for this."
Yeah.
Doctor Who comes around the corner chasing Mildred, who has somehow managed to disappear. Then we jump to the agency. Steele is cheerfully entering. He slaps the side of Mildred's desk and greets her with a hearty, "Good morning, Mildred," and then continues to stride toward his office. And then realizes that Mildred's not at her desk. Somewhat confused, he looks around as if wondering where she's gotten off to. She's probably out on a date.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that does seem to be her MO during lunch.
Yeah, which comes up at
later.
The very end of the episode, which is interesting.
I thought the same. I'll have some comments there for sure.
Anyway, Steele makes his way to the annex, pours himself a cup of coffee, and then goes to his office. He hesitantly approaches his desk, then rubs his hand over the top, seemingly not expecting a clean desk, which is kind of funny because that's what he usually has.
Yeah, it's always bare. I think it's more that he's feeling for the paper, right?
Yes, that's what he's.
Okay.
He's feeling this clean desk, and yes, it's like he's imagining that if he just rubs the desk the right way and in the right place, this newspaper will appear, because he does say newspaper intolerable.
I gotta appreciate though his like first world problems. right now. Like his sense of what is intolerable, right? Like for him, it's his coffee is apparently terrible. And here's a question that I have.
Okay.
This might just be me. Like, we have a nice coffee maker. How do you make bad coffee? Like, how does that happen? In like, how do you have a coffee maker and have the same two people make coffee and some of it's bad? Is it like putting too much in or putting not enough in? Or...
Well, apparently some people do it very well. I mean, make bad coffee very well because they do it over and over again. I don't know. Okay. You know, I know some of it has to do with the coffee itself, the coffee grounds itself, because I read something, I don't know, this is a long time ago, where they were commenting that the coffees that you get in the can, the Folgers, the MJB, the, something house, whatever it is, a lot of that is stale to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Like, I don't drink instant coffee.
Well, I'm not even talking instant. I'm talking about coffee grounds that you put into a regular coffee maker.
Yeah.
But that a lot of that is, it's already stale. It's already past date.
Right.
And so, if what is it they say? Bad ingredients make badder pizza. So, yeah, I mean, if you're starting out with a low quality coffee grounds to begin with, your coffee is going to turn out bad. But I think also a lot of people, and this is something I fought for a long time. A lot of people make coffee, I think, a little too weak.
Right.
Because, well, there's people who don't like it too strong. And so we don't, we want to make it so that they like it. Well,
but
guess
you
what?
You fix weak coffee. You can fix strong coffee.
Exactly.
You can't fix weak coffee.
That's right. If you make the coffee too strong for somebody, they can just put less of it in their cup and add more hot water.
Yeah.
And then they get the strength that they want. But yeah, you're right. You make it too weak, and yeah.
Can you tell my family used to own a coffee shop? I have very definite opinions about coffee. Apparently Laura is bad at making coffee, so
yeah. So anyway, yes, he takes a sip of the coffee and chokes on it. So apparently the coffee is as intolerable as the lack of newspaper. Yep. He begins shouting for Laura, who's at her desk opening mail and on the phone telling the person on the other end that she can't help them. She shushes Steele as she angrily tells the person on the phone that she doesn't know whether the steno pads they ordered are canary yellow or winter mint green, and they'll just have to call back. Well, Steele, who has been exhibiting a great deal of annoyance at having to wait for Laura to finish her discussion.
He's like a small toddler again, like, mommy, 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 mommy.
He points to the coffee in his cup and asks if she's tried the morning's coffee. Well, she's no mood for his drama.
I love her.
She snaps at him that she made it. She doesn't have to drink it. And Steele retorts that it's like a hot cup of the Thames. I have. Has he ever had a hot cup of the Thames? Does he really know this, or is he just imagining?
I get it. So what's funny about that is I have a different association with that phrase than everybody else in the world would, because I live in the other London, right? I live in London, Ontario. And we have a Thames River here too. Like, the people that created there's a Covent Garden, there's a Hyde Park, all of the stuff that's in the big London is also in the little London. And obviously when the city was created, they were not that creative. So they just named everything the same. So like a hot cup of the Thames here. Oh God. I mean, I don't know about the Thames River in London, England, but if you were to drink the Thames River here, you'd probably end up with a tail or some other sort of appendage. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So,
So anyway, Steele asks, "Where's Mildred?" And that, says Laura, is the question of the hour. Undeterred, Steele plows on with his venting. "The newspaper wasn't on my desk. The coffee is toxic, and my morning calm has been shattered. Laura, utterly shattered."
Doesn't take much,
he's saying this, no, I guess not. Anyway, as he's saying this, he's picked up the newspaper, which was apparently sitting on Laura's desk, and is fighting with the rubber band, which is holding the newspaper in its folding position, and losing the fight to the.
I'd hate to see him get his hands on like child-safe medication bottles. You know? Like, you have to push and twist.
Yeah, no. That's why you get them without those. Especially when you don't have kids in the house. You just, no, I'm not going to deal with it. Just, give it to me the old way. Anyway, Laura sarcastically tells Steele to buck up, Buttercup, saying that this is the first time that Mildred has been late. Is it really? And that she's sure that Mildred will be there as soon as to restore their order.
I was under the impression that I didn't even think Mildred had a schedule, because it seems that sometimes they'll come in. I'm serious, like, because it seems like sometimes they'll come into the office and she's not there, or she's there when they're not, or there's like it sort of feels
which makes it really tough to be late.
Yeah, right? Like, how can you be late when you're never, there's not a time? So yeah, but we get the impression that there is at least a time she does show up, because she's not there.
Given what we've seen, that Mildred seems to just come and go as she pleases, and that Laura has not seemed to ever have an issue with that.
Well, it's because, like, you pointed out, she's got so much on them with the IRS, right? Like, I'll be in at 10, but no, I will be in at 10.
So anyway, we jump back to see that Mildred has the dog in her arms as she hides behind a dumpster next to a fence. On the other side of the fence, Doctor Who is standing, looking, unable to locate Mildred. So he turns and heads off, giving Mildred the opportunity to skulk away. Back at the office, Steele has been calling Mildred's home, to no avail, as Laura continues to wade through the mail. There's a knock on the door. It's Mildred! No, it's not Mildred. It's a middle-aged woman, Mrs. Claiborne. She has a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Steele. Flustered, Laura tries to cover her lack of preparedness and the surprise of Mrs. Claiborne arriving by first introducing herself and Mr. Steele to the woman, and then covertly informing Mr. Steele of the purpose of the appointment by reminding him, in sarcasm quotes, that Mrs. Claiborne is the lady who asked them to locate her former classmates for a reunion. Elmhurst Finishing School, class of 47.
You know, Facebook would have put them out of business on that particular case.
That's true.
Literally, okay, well, I found, and it'll usually be like the people you don't want to reunite with, like people you may know. No, I don't want to. No.
Well, that's kind of true, but at the same time, what happens is that you look for somebody on Facebook and you get 75 of them.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, which one? And I know in the past, Facebook used to have the ability to say, well, somebody who lives in this area, but of course that assumes that they're still in that area.
Yeah.
Not everybody has a good functional photo on their Facebook page, and anybody whose name has changed.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're a woman and you've changed your name, then it's going to be difficult to find.
Or even a man, if you've changed your name.
True. Just traditionally, it's more common with women. I didn't change mine. Like, this is McNeil is my name. My husband, who is Scottish, his last name is Hooks. You go figure on that one. So what's funny is that they usually assume McNeil is his name because they hear his accent and they
well, it does,
right? Like
you can kind of understand how they make that assomption. Yes.
Yeah, they've called him. He's been called Mr. McNeil a couple of times. I always find it funny.
How does he react to that?
Well, the first time it happened, I was at the hospital because I had a migraine, and they took me in first, and he was out in the waiting room, and I guess the nurse went out to tell him he could come in, and she called Mr. McNeil a couple times. He didn't answer because that's not him. So it didn't occur to him that they were trying to, finally he clued in and he was like, oh no, that's not my name. So it was, but yeah, it's happened a couple times now, and he just sort of laughs it off because I tell him my name's more Scottish than his.
So anyway, Laura comments that she has Mrs. Claiborne as being a 10 o'clock appointment. Well, yes, but she changed it on Friday. Didn't their secretary tell her? What?
No, I'm just like that sort of expression on Laura's face, that sort of like tight, like, she didn't.
Yeah. Anyway, so Laura sidesteps the question of Mildred informing them by saying that they've had a bit of a mix-up this morning, and would Mrs. Claiborne mind waiting in their reception area for just a few minutes? As Laura and Remington escort the woman out of Laura's office, they are greeted by a delivery man. He's looking for Mildred.
Who isn't?
Yeah. Well, we have an apparent short time hop. The phone rings. Laura answers it. In the background, we see the delivery man wheeling in a very, very large potted plant. Practically a small tree.
This is an odd part of the episode. I get that it's meant to show that Mildred does all of these things, but the tree disappears shortly after that. We never see where it went, and it's not mentioned again.
Well, no, they have them in the center of the reception area for quite a while. But yeah, later in the day.
Yeah, later in the day.
Episode.
Yeah. And this episode takes place over the course of a day. Like, this is a whole day. That's it. The whole episode is a day, and it's so the tree thing I found kind of odd, because why would they order a tree that big for an office? Like, that's a weird choice to make overall for your office decor.
So anyway, he's rolling it in, and he asks where he should put it, and Laura, not paying attention to what's going on, with her back turned, not seeing what the man's just brought in, just absolutely says, put it anywhere. So he does, in the middle of the floor. Well, Laura's dealing with... That
was next level petty, though. Like, he could have put it somewhere out of the way, and he decided not to. He was like, no, I'm just going to plop it here.
Yeah. Well, hey... I'm guessing he didn't expect a tip on that, so
no,
why
probably
bother?
Not. Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, as Laura is dealing with yet another aggravation, the delivery man continues to bring in the Amazon rainforest, and Steele asks Mrs. Claiborne if an accomplished woman like herself would know how to make a potable cup of coffee. And somewhat confounded by the unexpected query, she tells Remington that, well, sometimes she makes coffee for her husband on the maid's day off, and her husband doesn't complain too much. Oh, to have that problem.
Yeah, right. Anyway. Like, both of them. To have the problem where your biggest issue is that your coffee is not made to your liking and your newspaper's not on your desk. Whoopity-doo. Right?
Well... Of course, nowadays, nobody has newspapers, so it would be, where's true. My iPad?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi's not working. That would be the equivalent.
There you go.
Wi-Fi's down.
Anyway, Steele takes Mrs. Claiborne off to introduce her to their coffee maker. Yeah. And Laura finally gets off the phone and turns and walks straight into one of the plants. Steele is hiding behind it, rather like the way he did at the dental convention in Still Sweet on You. And he asks pointedly, planning a nursery, are we? And Laura, frustrated, does the one thing you never do.
Never do this. Never.
She asks, well, what else could possibly go wrong?
You might as well just invite all the bad luck down on you right there.
That's right. Well, here it comes. 3 older women enter the office looking for Mildred. They are Hazel, Esther, and Rose, the Dragon Ladies.
I love
Mildred's
their name.
bowling team. Yeah. So as Laura and Steele are greeting the Dragon Ladies, yet another woman shows up. She's the Plant Lady, Monday and Thursday. And I checked, and no, she's not listed in the credits, but just from the visual appearance, this is not the same Plant Lady.
No, it is not.
From Santa Claus is Coming to Steele.
No, because the Plant Lady in Santa Claus is Coming to Steele is Jennifer Tilly, who is a major Hollywood actress. And has been in
now anyway.
Well, is now, but like obviously it wasn't then. But yeah. And she's got a very distinctive voice that like her anywhere when she speaks. But yeah, I guess they must have fired that. Well, she wasn't technically their regular Plant Lady anyway, was she?
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. She was a substitute.
Yeah, she.
So anyway. Let's see here. Where are we? Yes, the Dragon Ladies explained that they're looking for Mildred. She missed practice the night before, which she's never done. And semifinals are that night. They tried to reach her all the previous night until as late as midnight, but no answer. So they thought she might be off on another hush-hush assignment. Steele is confused. He said, Mildred? And Esther tells the other 2 women that, see, I told you they couldn't talk about it. Laura, as confused as Steele is, asks, talk about what? And the clarification that the women provide fails to clarify anything. It's okay, honey. We understand. Mildred told us about the kind of work she does, the intrigue, the danger. We didn't think you could talk about it if your top op was on a case. Top op, what a term. Anyway, Laura and Steele excuse themselves and retreat to his office. Laura tells Steele that regardless of what Mildred has been telling the Dragon ladies, she is worried. And Steele agrees that it's not like her at all, although I'm not sure if he's talking about Mildred missing bowling practice or not showing up at work or both. And as they talk, they keep getting interrupted by the plant lady. Laura reveals that Mildred had given her a key to her apartment for emergencies, and this sure seems like it qualifies, so Steele suggests that they use it. They leave the plant lady doing plant lady things, go to the outer office, and tell the Dragon ladies that they're sure Mildred isn't in any sort of trouble, but it never hurts to make sure. They decline Steele's offer to check in later, opting instead to wait there. After all, Mildred is the rock of their team, and they don't stand a chance without her tonight. Must be in a pretty, I'm going to say pretty meager league if one person can be the rock of their team, because that kind of implies that the other three women aren't that good.
Well, could maybe be just that she like boosts morale or something. I don't know. But you're right. If she's their only hope of winning, then yeah, the rest of them are dead weight.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how waiting at the office is any different than waiting anywhere else. But anyway, there you go. Mrs. Claiborne arrives with a cup of coffee for Steele. He takes it and then asks if she wouldn't mind taking care of the phones for a few minutes.
This is a Henry Arnock situation that I really like. I love it anytime you get like a character who's supposed to be their client
or something
ends up doing stuff that is not that
client
either
stuff.
Working for them or client stuff, or ends up working with them on the case or whatever. And in this case, she's really funny. The actress they've got playing her is really quite amusing. She could have easily come off as unlikable, but instead she's just kind of like confused and a little bit like ditzy, but ultimately very, very funny.
Yes. So anyway, she reluctantly agrees to the request, and Steele and Laura go shuffling off with class. You get it?
Yeah.
Toodaloo?
I got it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a dad joke. What can I say?
Yeah, it was bad.
How about a little support here, huh?
Sorry. It was very funny.
Yeah, fine, whatever. Anyway, next we see Mildred. She's still trying to get away. She's walking through an alley where trucks are being unloaded into buildings, and she is dirty and grimy and still carrying the dog. She goes to a phone booth and places a phone call. It would have been funny if they could have had a London call box at a Doctor Who convention that she went into. You
did notice it. This is the part where I have in my notes that this has to be a wink at the audience, because he's standing right next to a phone booth that Mildred's hiding in. And if anybody out there knows Doctor Who in any capacity, the ship that the Doctor travels in is a police public call box from the 1960s, and it's designed in a way to look like a phone booth. So yeah, like this, I think they had to know that this image of him standing right next to it was going to at least alert some Whovians to be in on the joke. I really like it.
So anyway, at the office, Mrs. Claiborne is sitting at Mildred's desk when the phone rings, and she answers with a cheery, "Yes." Mildred, not recognizing the voice, asks who it is. "Susan Claiborne. Who is this?" And puzzled, Mildred hangs up. Must have dialed the wrong number. So she places a second phone call, and again, the same unfamiliar voice answers. She tells the unknown voice that she's calling Remington Steele Investigations, and the voice on the other end tells her, "This is Remington Steele Investigations. Susan Claiborne speaking." And so, already distraught, having been chased and shot at, this is pretty much the last straw for Mildred. She exclaims, 45 minutes late, and already they've replaced me?
Yeah, I like that
and
line.
Of course, Susan Claiborne has no idea what Mildred is on about, but Mildred doesn't care to explain. She wants Mr. Steele. "Sorry, Mr. Steele isn't here." Then give me Miss Holt. She's not here either. And the dog in Mildred's arms growls. She looks around, sees her pursuer, and ducks down into the bottom of the phone booth. As Doctor Who walks up to the booth and stands next to it, looking around, Susan Claiborne is trying to get a response from Mildred, who has gone silent in her efforts so as not to attract the good doctor's attention. Mildred picks up the receiver, which she had dropped and which was dangling, and then she cautiously returns it to the cradle. Mrs. Claiborne hangs up in disgust, put out by the behavior of young people today. Mildred sneaks out of the phone booth, past the doctor, who is looking intently in the wrong direction, conveniently, and away, back the direction she came a few moments earlier. We jump to Mildred's home. The search by Laura and Steele has obviously been a failure. Steele shows Laura a stack of books, commenting that they explain where Mildred gets the fodder that feeds her overactive imagination.
It's probably like half mystery novels, but half like romance too, right? Like there's the Charlotte Knight shelf. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, she may have a Charlotte Knight shelf somewhere. I'm sure she does. But what they had here, are all detective stories.
Yeah.
And I did look them up, and they are legitimate books by legitimate authors.
Yeah.
Of course, the last one, Raymond Chandler, of course, one's obvious, but
very well known.
Yeah, but Nicholas Freeling was a British crime novelist, best known as the author of the Van der Valk series of detective novels. He won an Edgar Award from the Mystery Writers of America for Best Novel. Won a Golden Dagger from the Crime Writers Association, and France's Grand Prix de la Littérature Policière, or whatever. I don't speak French, so I'm butchering that. So
yeah, your accent was even worse than mine, and that's saying something.
So yeah, in fact, one of his novels, Love in Amsterdam, was adapted as the film Amsterdam Affair, directed by Gary O'Hara and starring Wolfgang Keeling as Van der Valk. So yeah, all of those are legitimate books, although the second one, Bugles Blowing, is alternatively known as What Are the Bugles Blowing For? So.
Oh, okay. But I'm just saying somewhere in that apartment is also a Charlotte Knight shelf.
Yeah. Yeah.
And under her bed, she saved all the transmissions from the dark place.
Yeah. Well, she probably wouldn't even have to hide them under her bed. I mean, she's the only one that lives there who's going to find them anyway.
That's true.
Behind them is a fireplace, and on the mantle is a plant, a photo of Mildred and the Dragon Ladies, the bowling team, a photo of Mildred and the Dragon Ladies, a bowling trophy, and a photo of Laura and Steele. Steele pulls down the photo of Mildred and the Dragon Ladies and passes that to Laura. And looking at the photo, Laura realizes that it would seem that the Dragon Ladies and Laura and Remington are all she has. And with some sense of disappointment in himself, Steele admits that he's never really thought about what Mildred does outside of the office. Laura joins in the admission, adding that it must get pretty lonely for her. Divorced, no children, just a sister living in Seattle. And Steele can understand why she might exaggerate to her friends and add a little color to her life and to theirs. And
it's not the first time she's done it either, because she did it in the circus episode.
Right.
Not to the same extent. Like, she obviously wasn't, but she was telling the seance people that she was a private investigator from Remington Steele Investigations. So.
Right. Yeah. But those are strangers, so the lies are acceptable, whereas Dragon Ladies are friends, and those lies are persistent. But anyway, as Laura and Steele are talking, Laura sees out the window and sees a man lurking outside. The man sees that he's been spotted, takes off running. Laura takes off running after the man, and Remington takes off running after Laura. They chase the man through the courtyard and into the back walkway, only to discover that they've lost him. Back at the office, Laura and Remington return. Susan Claiborne greets them and introduces them to an older gentleman named Kevin Masters, who informs them that he's just there to get his dog.
It's of course J.D. Cannon, who, and I mean, one of my favorite season 1 episodes, Steele in the News, and this is his second appearance on the show, and I think he's just as delightful in this episode as he is in Steele in the News. So, and it's funny because he's still kind of I don't want to say a bad guy because we like Kevin. But he does make his living on the shady side of the street, so to speak. So,
or did, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that he keeps turning up and playing these lovable bad guys, or at least sympathetic bad guys in the case of his character in Steele in the News.
Yeah, I think Steele in the News, he was sympathetic. Here, he's a lovable rogue.
Yeah, he is a lovable rogue, 100%.
So anyway, as I said, he's informed them that he's just there to get his dog, and upon hearing his name, the Dragon Ladies rush up and ask him if he's Shirley's friend. Steele asks, who's Shirley? But just then, the dog that Mildred has been running with enters the office and rushes over to Masters. Then Mildred comes stumbling into the office, exhaustion on her face and in her voice. She apologizes for being late and then begins to collapse. Steele and Laura rush over to catch her. We have a time jump. Not a big one, but still a time jump. Mildred is lying on the couch at Steele's office and is telling Laura and Steele about her ordeal as Laura applies a damp cloth to her forehead. Laura tells her to rest, that they'll talk later, and then she and Remington go back out into the reception area where they assure the Dragon Ladies that Mildred is fine, she just needs some rest. The dog walks over to Steele, barks at him, looks up at him, and then grabs his pant leg in his mouth and starts pulling at it.
Do you think he recognizes another thief? Do you think the dog's like, yeah, I know who this guy is. I know what he's up to.
But I don't know, because he doesn't do that to Masters.
True.
But anyway, Masters insincerely scolds the dog and then apologizes to Steele, saying that the dog is just excited by all the attention. Laura asks Masters to explain exactly what he and his dog are doing there. Hazel jumps in, explaining that Shirley gave her a jingle, so she rang up Mildred, and Mildred buzzed Shirley. Steele again asks, who is Shirley? And then a voice from the hallway calls out, I'm Shirley. I'm Shirley Milch is the name. The voice is followed by a tall, middle-aged woman who greets the dog and then Masters, and then turning to Remington Steele asks, you Steele? Me Steele. Laura directs Shirley to her office, so Laura, Shirley, and Steele fight their way through the jungle.
Yep.
In Laura's office, Steele invites Shirley to sit down and says that in matters of this nature, he finds it advisable for subjects to focus on the initial stages on their narrative and then to proceed chronologically. And Shirley has no idea what he said, and she looks at Laura and says, what did he say?
Start from the beginning.
Laura, there you go. So Shirley grooms dogs. Mr. Masters dropped his dog off on Sunday, like always. She put him in the back and then heard something. She ran out, and there's a guy running off with the dog. So she chased him, but he hops in a car and drives off. But being no dummy, she copied down the license plate. But now she has a problem. She runs the business out of her home. Nice and simple, no formalities, and no business license. And then Laura asks why Shirley called Mildred. Except Shirley didn't call Mildred. She called Hazel. Hazel called Mildred. Mildred called crazy. Yeah. Okay, Mildred says no problem. She'll have the dog back by noon today, and so she does. End of story. Well, they thank Shirley for her somewhat confused account and dismiss her. Laura closes the door, bemoaning the fact that it isn't enough that she has to cover for Steele as a detective, but now she has to worry about Mildred. Steele suggests that they could have a little chat with her about misrepresentation, and Laura pointedly counters that, well, why doesn't he talk to her about it being an expert on the subject?
Yeah, I like this is a cute pointed comment, but it's also another opportunity, and I know they don't go there with this episode, but it would have been another perfect opportunity for Steele to sit down with Mildred and have another chat about who he really is, because Mildred keeps getting herself into these little situations where she misrepresents herself because she admires him so much, right? She sees him as this amazing man of mystery and action and expertise and all the stuff, but and we see that later when she does find out the disappointment, but also the frustration that she's qualified, that he's not qualified either, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he still gets the respect, and she, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, after Laura says that, Steele pretty much kind of just glides over it and calmly urges her to calm down, and saying that after all, she did get the dog back, talking about Mildred. Laura informs him that he's missing the point. Obviously, Mildred used Laura's confidential sources to trace that license plate, and that personally she finds that offensive, and professionally it's fraudulent. Real detectives lose their licenses for things like that, and Steele counters, arguing that perhaps it's Laura who's missing the point. Regardless of any improprieties, it appears that Mildred has had a harrowing time, and for reasons presently obscure at best. Well, Laura tacitly calls a truce, admitting that, okay, Steele is right and that they need to deal with first things first. She asks what could be so important about a dog that someone would kidnap it and then shoot to keep it. Laura steps over to the door, opens it, and then steps back into the reception area and calls the dog. Steele hops up, rushes to her, and grabs her arm, urging her not to be hasty. Yes, and that's because the dog once again rushes over, grabs Steele's pant leg, and once again starts tugging on it. Yeah, that dog does not like him, and they do say that dogs are good judges of character.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Anyway, they have Kevin Masters in the office. He introduces himself. No, he's in the office with Mildred. He introduces himself, telling her that it's his dog that she recovered, and that he heard the story of her experience and just wanted to thank her. Well, Mildred is clearly charmed. She smiles and assures Masters that it was nothing. Masters hesitates and then says that, well, he'd better let her get back to sleep. But she quickly reaches out toward him, not quite touching him, but close enough to send the message, which she follows up on by saying, no, that's okay. You can keep me up a little longer. Back in Laura's office, Laura's pacing, dog in her arms, while Steele stitches up the leg of his trousers. Laura comments that she thought Steele got along with dogs. Steele says, well, I do. Dogs love me. I love dogs. That is obviously not a dog. It's some other animal masquerading as a dog.
It is curious as to why the dog doesn't like him.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, Laura notices the flashy collar around the dog's neck and calls Steele's attention to it. Steele reaches over toward Laura, presumably so he can roll the collar over to see it for himself, but as he does, the dog snaps at him, causing him to jerk his hand back. So Laura removes the collar and hands it to Steele, asking, am I imagining things, or are these real diamonds? Steele somewhat carefully reaches out to take the collar, trying to stay out of the range of the dog. And he gives the diamonds a somewhat cursory examination, concluding that, yes, they do appear to be authentic enough. And he hands the collar back to Laura. And again, the dog bares his teeth at Steele. There's a knock on the door. Susan Claiborne steps in, announcing that there's a gentleman here to see them. Laura answers, telling Mrs. Claiborne to tell the gentleman to wait outside because they're very busy. But she insists that the gentleman is rather insistent. In fact, he has a gun.
I have a question about this.
Okay.
The nylon over the face.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
I thought you might ask about that.
Okay, so maybe you can. I don't get this because you can still see their face. So what is the point of putting nylon over your face? You can still see their face.
Yes, but it does distort the face, and it makes it.
I mean, not that much though.
It makes it more difficult to identify, from police lineup photos, or to describe. But yeah,
I feel
you're
like
right.
Tom Baker's face is so distinctive that a bit of nylon would not make a difference.
But
anyway.
yeah, I mean, it's a technique
I wondered if it had something to do with security cameras. I had always wondered if maybe, yes, you can see them. You can clearly see them if you're looking at them in person, but maybe it distorts on a security camera so you can't see their face on the camera.
I'm sure that is something that the nylon stocking over the head does. But I think just in general, the idea, whether it's successful or not, the idea is just to distort the features enough that they can't be positively identified after the fact, making any identification somewhat less useful in a criminal case in court.
Okay.
Because, he was wearing a nylon over his face. It kind of distorted his features. Well, then it might have been somebody else underneath that nylon, right? Well, I suppose it could have been.
Yeah.
So
I also get a kick out of the image of Tom Baker going into a store to buy the nylons. Right. And then like the looks from the clerk and him saying, "Oh, it's for my wife." And then that sounded French, not British, but you get what I'm saying. Like, and then putting it on his head. Anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, he steps in. She's wearing a stocking over his head. Susan Claiborne is shoved out of the way. He steps into the office with his gun pointed at Laura and demands, "Give me that." And thinking that he must mean the diamond-crusted collar, Laura stretches out her hand to hand it to the man, but in a somewhat angry tone, he says, "No, not that. That," meaning the dog. So she quickly hands the dog to the man, who half turns, exiting the room, leaving Laura and Steele to ponder the man's choice. And as the man closes
Why not take both? Like, it's a diamond necklace. I don't know.
Maybe
It just seems to me
thought it was
that,
rhinestones or something.
well, but also if he's a known jewel thief and he's wanting to like this is somebody he's been hunting for years, who made him look like a fool, who humiliated him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If this collar is the ill-gotten gain of one of his jobs, one would think that he'd want it if for no other reason than to prove that he was right.
Yeah, and you would think he would have recognized it as something that he had seen in the file. But yeah. Anyway, so the man closes the door behind him on his way out, and he's intent on making his escape, but Kevin Masters sees him with his dog and tries to tackle him, but the man hits him over the head, knocking Masters down. And then, of course, the doctor runs out of the reception area and into the hallway to make his escape. Laura and Steele run out of the office and into the hallway to follow, but from the far end of the hall, the man turns and fires a shot at them, causing them to dive for cover behind the offset portion of the wall just outside their office. And although the man didn't hit them with any of the bullets, presumably he did hit the wall at the other end of the hallway, it gives him just enough time to disappear into the elevator. Laura and Steele head to the stairs, but then Steele stops them, saying, "Yeah, it's 11 flights of stairs, and yeah, by the time we get down there, it's no point." Laura concurs, saying that he'd be in Poughkeepsie by the time they got down the stairs, and so they returned to the office.
Isn't that on the other end of the country? Like, Poughkeepsie's in New York, is it not?
I believe so,
I had a friend who used to live in New York State, so, like, that's a ways to go. You'd think he'd say something like Bakersfield if you're, like, going for California locations. Oxnard, I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe he's not that familiar with California, and Poughkeepsie, or Laura's not. Well, she would be. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Maybe it's exaggeration for the purpose of illustration. Anyway, the Dragon Ladies and Shirley are helping Masters to his feet, and as consolation, Shirley tells him that the grooming charges for the week are on the house. Yeah, they better be. You lost his dog.
Right? Well, I mean, to be fair, like, I doubt that a groomer is expecting one of her clients' dogs to be abducted by an ex-Interpol agent intent on,
Yeah, but I mean, come on.
It's a bit of an outside-the-box scenario,
Anyway, Laura and Steele come back into the office, telling Masters that no, they didn't catch him, but can they have a word with him, indicating that he should follow them into the inner office. Once in Laura's office, she asks him to explain what makes his dog so popular. And Masters, seemingly sincerely, says that he doesn't know, and that he's as baffled by it as they are. But Steele isn't quite buying it. He says, after all, dog nappings at gunpoint are hardly an everyday occurrence, even in Los Angeles. Laura pulls the collar out of her pocket, shows it to Masters, and asks, "What about this?" Steele wonders what real diamonds are doing on a dog's collar.
Yeah, same. Like, I get that's your companion and stuff, but dude.
Hey, people spoil their dogs with some of the craziest things.
Dogs sniff butts of other dogs. It seems to me that you don't put diamonds around a creature that sniffs another creature's butt. That just, I think, should be common sense. But also, why doesn't Kevin come clean here? It's stated later on that the statute of limitations has run out on his crimes, like the stuff that he did. So
we'll get to that. Because not everything is always as it appears to be.
Fair. I think it would have made more sense if he wants his dog back for him to be honest.
No, I think there's an explanation that comes up, and Laura and Steele miss it.
Okay, all right. You point it out to me when we get there.
Oh, I will. All right. Trust me,
I know.
I will. Anyway, taking the collar from Laura, he looks at it, and it's clear that Masters is deeply moved, as there's a quiver in his voice when he says, "That dog is all I have in the world. He and I go back a long way. I don't have anyone to spoil, so I'm afraid I spoil him." Laura wonders why someone would take the dog and not the collar. Again, Masters says he doesn't know, but he'll pay them anything to get the dog back. He stretches out his hand to hand the collar back to Laura, telling her to take it as collateral. Steele starts to reach out to take the necklace, but Laura slaps his hand away. I think we've seen this before.
Yep.
Softly, she tells Masters that won't be necessary and they'll see what they can do. Next, Mildred is giving her story to Laura and Remington, detailing her escape from the doctor, who she says she took buses, cabs, anything to get away from the man. In fact, she's been to places in the last 20... Exactly. West Covina, City of Industry, Anaheim, Azusa, Cucamonga. No, sorry, that's Jack Benny and Mel Blanc. Anyway, she thought she'd given the man the slip, but clearly she hadn't. And Laura suggests that they start with the place where Mildred found the dog. Mildred says the address is in her purse. Laura hands Mildred the purse, who begins rummaging around in it. And as she's digging out the paper with the address, she says that she called Laura's friend Al at the DMV to trace the license plate number given to her by Shirley. It was a rental car from... Go ahead.
I have a question here. Because back earlier when Steele basically kind of advocated on behalf of Mildred and said, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. She's been through something. Laura seemed upset because she claimed, personally it's offensive and ethically it's fraudulent or whatever it was she said. Aside from the ethics ? Statement of, Laura commenting on what's fraudulent and what isn't.
Right.
How is, she called a contact that the agency has at the DMV to trace a license plate. Yes, Mildred should not have been doing this on, going out to look for it on her own. But I don't understand how her making that phone call, this is a contact of Laura's, that if the case had come to Steele and Laura, they would have done that too. And they would have asked Mildred to call them. They would have said, Mildred, call Al at the DMV, trace his plate. I don't know. It just seems to me that
what's Al doing running a license plate for them?
Well, that's right. That's kind of where I'm getting at it.
Ethics.
Laura's kind of picking and choosing her own ethical lines to cross or not to cross, and it's getting more creative with every every situation that comes up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anyway, Mildred says that the car was a rental from Johnson Leasing, and she's called them and gotten a local address, which is what she hands to Laura on the piece of paper. And then she asks, "You're not mad at me, are you?" And Laura gives her a mildly evil eye and assures her that they'll talk about it later. That's not good. Steele adds that for the moment, they're just glad she's all right.
And I think Steele has the right, and I don't want to equate Mildred to that of a child because she's not a child, but this sort of situation makes me think of a parent or two parents where their child has made a mistake, but has made the mistake because they're struggling with something, right? Maybe they went to a party that they shouldn't have gone to, but they did so because they just, moved to a new town, didn't have any friends, whatever it happened to be. Mildred's obviously struggling with loneliness. They've seen that when they went to her apartment, and they see that she has nobody except the dragon ladies and them. And she's divorced, she's isolated, and it just feels like Steele kind of gets that. Maybe because he's gone his whole life without roots, without like people that are permanent fixtures that he knows are going to stick around. But Laura seems to be missing the point and focusing on, well, you did this thing and this thing you shouldn't have done, and yes, she did, but at the
she's missing the point, the part of it that is the reason that Mildred did that.
Yeah, like the human element of it was that Mildred wanted to feel a part of something and doesn't. She is obviously, the episode is sort of designed to show us how useful and necessary Mildred is. But it's easy to not feel that way when you're arguing about canary yellow versus winter mint green steno paper, and they're out saving the world, or at least that's how it seems. So it kind of feels like Laura, and I know that Steele talked her into having a little bit more compassion, but like when she says you're not mad, and her response is, we'll talk about it later, I feel like Steele's response of, we're just glad you're okay, in that moment is the better response. Yes, obviously have a conversation about her, like about it with her when everything's said and done, and it's all over, and you can say, you really can't walk around pretending to be a detective. You're going to get hurt. But not here. She feels bad enough,
As you were saying that, something occurred to me, and this was back at the beginning of it when you were talking about I don't remember now exactly what it was that you said, but I think maybe Remington is seeing the same thing in Mildred that he felt in the first season.
Yeah. Yeah, now that you say that.
I'm here, I'm around these detectives. I want to learn, and nobody's bothering to try and teach me. It's the same kind of reaction Steele had in season 1, and he says, well, teach me.
That's a good point.
Mildred hasn't, she hasn't said, teach me outright, but I think this is kind of her.
But she also probably
this is how it's coming out of her.
Yeah. She also probably thinks of herself, and I don't see Mildred this way, and I'm sure the fans don't see Mildred this way, but if I were Mildred and I wasn't maybe seeing myself the way others see me, she probably sees herself as a woman who's, quote, over the hill, right? She's older. She's past her prime. She's a washed up bureaucrat. I think she uses that term about herself at one point, right? And isn't as exciting or as dynamic as these two young people that she works with, who are energetic and athletic and young and all of these things. Like, she probably just doesn't feel like she's up to snuff enough to even ask, teach me. Because there's this perception that as you get older that you're too old for that. You're too old to start again. You're too old to go back to school. You're too old to get a new career. You're too old to... And I don't think that's true, and I don't think Laura and Steele do either, but I think you're right when you said that she feels like Steele did in season 1, only she probably thinks, well, I'm too old to ask to learn this stuff.
Well, and the other thing is that, yeah, you're probably right in that Laura and Steele don't feel that she's too old to learn to do these things, and that she's, over the hill and she's not of any use. But that's probably a lot of what Mildred has gotten from other people of their age, because there's a lot of people that age that do think that, never trust anybody over 30. It's funny how the people who used to say that
are now,
a long time ago are now the people in charge that everybody's saying, don't trust them. Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of the general attitude of a lot of people, Steele and Laura's age. And so I think Mildred has probably encountered that before, and so she's just whether it's right of her or not, she's kind of seeing, well, okay, they may not want to, they probably don't. If I ask them, they might a little bit, but no.
Or I can't learn that. I'm too old to learn that. Like she might think herself as too old to do, which is interesting because of the three of them, Mildred is the one that has the technical expertise. Mildred is the one who has the, like, Steele doesn't know how to turn on a computer, much less order the X22 double J or whatever it is that she needed to order. Like, Mildred actually has a lot of skills that are very useful in their line of work, but probably doesn't see that.
Well, and the other thing is that she thinks of herself as a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
She may not be able to imagine herself as being anything other than a bureaucrat, despite how much she might want to be able to do these other things. And so she's got this Walter Mitty type life, alternate life that she tries to live out just to kind of, to just kind of live a fantasy, kind of like what we have in an episode coming up where people dress up as detectives and
That's
play
crazy.
a game.
Who would ever do that?
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of reasons why she's doing it. And they all focus on the fact that she is wanting to do something, wanting to be something, wanting to learn something. And she doesn't know how to go about doing it. She doesn't even know how to go about asking.
No.
And she's afraid to ask because she's afraid of what the answer will be. No.
Yeah, and I think that's as much a stumbling block as anything, because I've noticed that as I get older, some of the things that I see kids doing are things that, like, if they turn out well, it's because they're fearless, right? They don't seem to have that same block of, well, I can't do that now, I'm too old for that, or whatever it is we tell ourselves when we're scared, because we see all the potential ways it could go wrong or just fail or not, and she even says to Laura when she talks about it that they're so young and admired. They have each other, like all of those things, that it's sad, like that she feels that way about herself because she's not all of those things, but you can see how society would have taught her as much.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Mildred, after this exchange with Laura about not being mad at her, she tries to explain and partially make excuses for what she did. She says that she didn't think it would turn out like this, that when Hazel called, it seemed so minor, stolen dog for crying out loud. And, well, she'd been telling them all for a while that she's, more than a secretary. And a half smile kind of steals across Remington's face. So she couldn't say no. And I think here Laura and Steele are a little bit chagrined at the further confirmation of how much they've been overlooking her and taking her for granted. And they assure her that she is important to them as she is, and that she is very much appreciated. But this is what you were talking about here. She can't help comparing her life to theirs. And in her eyes, her life comes up short. Yeah. She says, well, maybe she's important. Maybe she's appreciated sometimes. But as you said, Laura and Steele are young, admired. Their lives are important. And even though she doesn't understand their relationship, at least they have each other. And sometimes it's hard for her. She's just an old bureaucrat with a busted up marriage and fading memories. And Steele moves over to her, puts his arm around her and gives her a big hug and says, and she says, sometimes she just wants to feel important too.
Which I just want to hug her there as well. Like, she's such a sweet character and such a wonderful, open, sort of almost childlike in some ways, but obviously has her tough moments too. So you just kind of want to give her a big old hug and tell her she's valuable.
Yeah. So anyway, next we see that Susan Claiborne is on the phone, and we pick up the conversation midway as she's telling her friend, yes, and they've asked me to stay the rest of the day. I mean, can you imagine, Carol? Me working? Actually, it's not nearly as pleasant as I'd always imagined it was. Wow. Talk about a clueless socialite.
Well, I mean, she did go to Emerson Finishing School, class of 47. So she's obviously, but I love the fact that she's never had to work a day in her life. And then she can you imagine me working? But is she? She's on the phone to her friend.
Yeah. Not really working, and not even answering the phones all that well because she doesn't know how to answer.
She's slightly better than Abigail. Was it Abigail that answered it in that one episode?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. That one episode where thou shalt not steal, when Steele is hanging from the thing and he calls Abigail and she's trying to take the message. Slightly better than that, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'd go with Abigail, but anyway.
All right, that's fair.
Anyway, let's see, where were we here? Yes, Laura and Steele have brought Mildred out into the reception area where she is joyfully greeted by the dragon ladies, who Steele says will see her home. Laura, wanting to make sure that Mildred is kept in high esteem by her friends, asks if
sweet.
She wants Laura to make that court appearance for her on the Williamson matter. And Mildred hesitates for a moment and then appreciatively, I think, plays along, saying certainly, and asking Laura to extend her apologies to the judge. Steele joins in the charade, saying that he's just reviewed the Rothenberg dossier and tells her it's first rate, as always. Yeah. And is there anything else that they need to know in her absence? And she says, no, I think you've been brought up to date. And then she asks to be kept up to date on any developments in the Masters case. And by the way, don't you think we should do something about these plants?
Yeah, I was taking it one step too far. This is where she takes that inch and takes a mile, or they give her that inch and she takes a mile.
Well, Steele's got a little bit of a dour look on his face, and he promises that he'll take care of that right away. Boss lady. Anyway, Mildred tells the dragon ladies that they can take the limo. And of course, all of this is absolutely impressed the ladies. Well, after they leave, Steele tells Laura that he hadn't realized until this moment just how frustrating it must be for her to pretend that he's the head of the agency. And of course, Laura, misinterpreting his comment as a sincere expression of empathy, she retorts, well, it's about time. But then Steele continues, passively aggressively saying, I mean, for over a year now, you've had to put up with the countless charades, the indignities of that sort that I've just experienced for a brief moment, and yet found quite demeaning, even at that. It's truly remarkable the way you've been able to keep your emotions in check while I take the glory for all your efforts. Truly remarkable. Yes, keep up the good work.
And meanwhile, Laura is plotting his
death.
She's wanting to rip his head off and make it into a plant potter. Like, just,
No, just feed it to the plants.
You feed it to the plants. Like, feed me, Seymour. Yeah, she's not. I like it.
Not happy.
That's funny.
Well, next we see Laura and Steele arriving at the motel that previously had been visited by Mildred. And the cabin they head to is number 4, rented by a John Smith. Laura comments about the name being an alias. Although you'd think an English guy would be John Smythe.
Which the doctor has used John Smith as an alias.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would just like to point that out because that's another Doctor Who-ism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, shots ring out as they approach the cabin. They hit the ground, and then after a moment, Steele gets up, rushing the door. He begins trying to force his way in, but the door isn't cooperating. And in the meantime, we see that the doctor is rushing to climb out the back window of the room, dog in hand. We see that there's a body on the floor blocking the door as Steele manages to finally push it open just enough to squeeze through. As he gets into the room, the dog jumps from the arms of the Time Lord, who is clearly now more concerned with his escape than hanging onto the dog.
Yeah.
Laura and Steele rush over to the window in time to see our suspect go racing away in his car. And once again, the dog grabs Steele's pants leg and plays tug of war with it. Their suspect gone, they turn their attention to the body by the front door. Laura recognizes him as the man that she had chased at Mildred's apartment. Steele digs through the man's pocket for his ID. He finds it, reads it, and then lets out with a shocked, "Oh my." Laura asks, "What is it?" Steele hands her the ID. "Jonathan Hemmings, Interpol." Laura lets out with a shocked, "Oh my."
Yeah.
Well, we have a time jump. The body has been loaded into the coroner's wagon. A homicide detective approaches Laura and Steele, saying that he didn't know that Laura had a dog. And Laura can't help rubbing it in just a bit, saying that dog belongs to Mr. Steele. He just loves dogs. Steele gives her a dirty look and then asks the detective to clarify about the officer knowing Hemmings. And the officer, he really didn't know him, only that Hemmings had come to the office, said he was trying to find an Anatole Blaylock, a former Interpol man who was going around using Interpol credentials and contacts. The officer leaves, and Laura and Steele begin walking back toward the rabbit. And as they are walking, Laura says that Blaylock is probably the one they're after. It would explain what Hemmings was doing at Mildred's apartment. After all, if he saw Blaylock chasing Mildred, he picked up on her identity somehow and then decided to check her out. Steele seems to only be half listening. The other half of his mind is on other things. And he tells Laura that this case has just become extremely interesting. Years ago, Interpol put Anatole Blaylock in charge of apprehending a brilliant thief known as Le Renard, the Fox. Blaylock failed utterly. Interpol had him cashiered out, but apparently Blaylock became unhinged by it all.
Okay, I don't know. Did you catch this movie, like, association? At this point, okay, so his nickname is the Fox. Mm-hmm. He uses a dog to steal. The Fox and the Hound. The Fox and the Hound.
And you thought my joke was bad.
Anyway, and also, okay, yeah, it was a bad joke, but also, like, we see Blaylock as the bad guy in this episode, and yes, he is, because he's killing people, but at the same time, should we not feel a little bad for this poor guy? I mean, he was put in charge of apprehending a thief. He was a man of the law whose job it was to catch somebody who was stealing millions of dollars in jewels and things like that. And he had the right guy. He knew who it was. And he not only failed to get him, but they basically humiliated him, treated him like crap, kicked him out of his job. Like, I don't know about you, but if I were in his position, I'd want revenge too. And so I kind of can't fault him for being ticked off.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you up to the point where he starts killing people.
Well, the murder, obviously that's the part where he's snapped, right? Because he couldn't catch Le Renard, and he's gotten to the point where it's like all bets are off. But you just sort of have to feel bad for how it happened, because he was doing his job, and technically he was doing the right job. Like, he was the good guy, and now he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So, yeah.
Anyway, as they're getting into the car, Laura asks Steele how he knows so much about Blaylock. And Steele says that for a while, Interpol thought that he was the Fox. He wasn't, but admits that there were times that he wished he was. Back at Mildred's apartment, she has made chocolate chip cookies, which Kevin Masters is enjoying. They are conversing about the cookies and how neither one of them likes chocolate chip cookies made the correct way. And after a few moments, no comment? No comment? Okay.
They mean without nuts in them?
Yes. Which is not the correct way.
Yeah, no, they should never have nuts in them. Nuts or raisins.
No, always.
The raisins.
Oh, I agree with you. No raisins, but
the raisins are the worst, because you pick it up and you're expecting walnuts. Chocolate chips, and
Yeah.
Instead you get raisins. Like, that is the worst disappointment, you know?
Yeah. No, but anyway. Definitely need walnuts.
No, you should never have nuts and no.
Anyway, after a few moments, Mildred asks Masters about himself, and it's clear that she is at least interested in him.
Oh, yeah.
He says there's much to tell. He's retired, and mostly he takes walks with his faithful companion. And Mildred is momentarily let down, supposing that he means his wife, but no, he just means his dog. And just then there's a knock on the door and the sound of the dragon ladies calling for her. Masters, kind of taking a hint there, says it's time for him to leave anyway, and then suggests that maybe he'll drop by the next day. If Mildred is going to be there. Yeah, she'll be there.
Yeah.
He walks out the door past the dragon ladies whose jaws have just dropped several inches.
Oh, yeah.
And as the ladies come in,
Millie's getting some, right? Millie's got
she got it going on, eh?
Yeah.
So the ladies come in, with Mildred closing the door behind them, and they give her one of those, we know what's going on, but we want all the details looks. And Mildred coyly says, he's just a friend. And the dragon ladies exchange, those sure he is looks with each other. And outside, as masters leave, we see Dr. Blaylock lurking on the floor of Steele's floor of Steele's apartment. Newspapers covering the entire floor.
This
Laura
is a little weird. The dog presumably is already house trained. I would think.
Well, yeah. Well, Steele's got a book though. That's telling him everything he needs to know. And maybe the book says to cover his floor with newspapers.
Like I could see doing this with a puppy, but the dog is several years old and has obviously been with masters forever. So I can't imagine that he'd be peeing all over the place.
Well, he might if he's trying to express dissatisfaction. Anyway.
Why is that what you do when you're mad?
No, I mean, a dog will express himself in different ways, and maybe that's just how he does it with Steele, because he does later on. Anyway, the floor is covered with newspapers. Laura's sitting in a chair, Steele standing near the window. The dog is a short distance away, and as I said, Steele has a dog training book and is attempting to exert some degree of control over the dog, and failing.
Yeah.
He tells the dog to stay. The dog walks away. He tells the dog to sit. The dog stands. He tells the dog to stand. The dog rolls over. Steele flips through a few pages of the book, stops, reads, and then states, Wookiees!
I love how he says this. This is one of Pierce Brosnan's finest comedic moments. He sounds like an 80-year-old woman. Wookiees!
Well, Steele smiles in triumph, and Laura begins laughing, pointing at him, and Steele looks down to see the dog urinating on his shoe. So that's what I mean. A dog express their dissatisfaction in various ways.
He's just probably telling him to shut up. Like, all right, dude.
In disgust, Steele comments that it sickens him to think that this dog and Old Yeller are members of the same animal family. He then tosses the obviously useless dog training manual away. Well, Laura's been going through some of Steele's scrapbooks. What? Where does he keep him when he's on the move?
And and not only this, but I'm having trouble picturing like Steele scrapbooking, because scrapbooking is like, does he sit there with his little glue and scissors and like label makers, and does he go to craft supply stores for like ribbons to make his little scrapbooks all pretty like that? I don't know. Does he have like, no, Laura, I can't go out tonight. It's scrapbook day. I have to fill in my crime scrapbook. I mean, I get that it's a convenient plot device that he keeps this stuff around, and it does make sense that he would have kept track of famous crimes or things that he wished he had committed, even if he himself didn't, but like news clippings and stuff. But the fact that it's a scrapbook is just very cute.
Well, I guess, it kind of makes sense, because if you're going to save those things, you want to have them where you can easily access them, look at them, read them, study them. And so putting them, even though he was probably not thinking, well, I'm scrapbooking. It was probably a convenient way for him to do it. So
I can see he and like Mildred having scrapbook day. They sit down, they've got their supply. But it's funny because with that particular, like, at the risk of judging the show by today's standards, nowadays that would be a file on his computer. Right, with all of
that's true. Yes,
it would be like a doc
folder
or a folder. Yeah, with all of the stuff that he'd found on the internet. So yeah, you're right. It would make sense to have physical copies, because the only way you get your hands on it is through newspaper clippings and stuff like that. But still, it's cute.
Anyway, as Laura's talking, Steele snags one of the books from her lap, flips through it for a moment, then hands her the book, tapping on the page. The article entitled Le Renard Strikes Again Makes Off with Kronosberg Necklace is accompanied by a photo of the aforementioned Kronosberg necklace, which just happens to be the dog's collar. Yeah, Kevin Masters, their client, is the master criminal Le Renard. And Steele is practically giddy.
Oh, he's excited. Like, this is, aside from meeting like Hollywood stars, this is him meeting his idols, right?
Yeah.
Like his professional colleagues who he looks up to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's pretty stoked.
Yeah. Well, Laura urges him to focus, saying that the articles mention an alleged accomplice named Doolittle.
Ruff.
The dog barks. They continue discussing and again mention the name Doolittle.
Ruff.
The dog barks.
Sorry,
Laura
I
tells
wanted to
Steele
provide
to
the sound effects.
Laura tells Steele to listen, realizing that there's a connection. Steele doesn't hear anything. After a pause, Laura calls out, Doolittle.
Ruff.
The dog barks. Steele scolds the dog, saying he's trying to listen.
Yeah, I know. Talk about missing the point. Holy cow.
Steele scolds Steele, saying, don't you see? And then she calls again, Doolittle.
Ruff.
The dog barks, but this time he also runs over and again urinates on Steele's shoe.
Maybe he just doesn't like his shoes. Maybe he's just decided that Steele has terrible taste in footwear and he wants to let him know.
Who knows? Could be. Anyway, next it's night. Laura and Steele drive up to a modest trailer in a mobile home park. Surprisingly,
is it a trailer?
Yes.
I didn't catch that.
Yes, and it surprises Laura, who has expected that a master thief would have grander digs. Masters opens the door for Laura and Steele, and Laura hands him the dog. Masters takes him and excitedly begins petting him and talking to him. Laura comments that Doolittle's a fine dog. It takes a fraction of a second, but Masters freezes, and then he asks if he told him the dog's name. It still begins with a response that I think it's a very self-revealing comment, almost a dramatically ironic comment, in that he's been told that one of the greatest frustrations of being a master criminal is the inability to take credit for one's own craft. Then he continues, Le Renard, for instance, who pulled off such remarkable jobs as the Macedonian chalice, the Habsburg triptych, the Panther's Eye ruby of Simba. What restraint he must have not to throw open the shutters of the world and shout, I did it. And Laura gently observes that he must love that dog an awful lot to give him a collar that could put him away. Masters asks if Mildred knows. Laura shakes her head no. And he invites them in, offering them a seat, and then asks what this is all about. Anatole Blaylock. Masters is silent for a moment, and then he describes Blaylock as a cruel chap, but thankfully not too quick. He adds that he thought Blaylock had quit searching for him years ago. He realizes that Laura is staring at him rather wide-eyed, and for a moment, even we see a somewhat incredulous look on Laura's face. And Masters asks her why she's looking at him like that.
So earlier in this scene, when Steele's doing his little speech about how, take Le Renard, for instance, and the names, and he names all the crimes, for some reason, the look on Stephanie's face appears angry. And then here, when he says the comment about Blaylock being cruel but not too quick, you're right. She sort of looks odd, and I'm curious. I can't quite pin her down in this scene. I can't figure out where she's coming from. At least in the couple of shots we see of her face, it was confusing for me, because it would be a bit hypocritical for her to be disapproving of Master's occupation when she's literally working with somebody who did the same thing, and is just, and I feel like she's come enough of a ways to see that, yes, what he was doing was outside the law, but there was some talent in it, I guess, because she called up that master forger when they needed him, and she seems to at least appreciate the work, if not the legality of it. So I don't know. It's the the expression on her face in that one bit, and then the expression here kind of feels. I'm not quite sure what they're going for.
I don't have, and I don't know if you do or not, a copy of the original script.
No.
Yeah, all I've got is the transcript from the Steele and Love website.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wonder if there was something in the script just at the beginning of this sequence that might have led Stephanie to have this type of a look on her face at that point, which then changed.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe it's just at the beginning she's thinking about Masters and Mildred and
could be
what
it could be
Mildred
that she
went through as a result of this. The fact that Mildred seems to be kind of taken to him.
And she obviously didn't approve of Daniel and her mother either. So it could just simply be that she doesn't like the idea of Mildred getting involved with somebody who makes his living on the shady side of the law, as they say, which, hello, pot, this is the kettle.
It just occurred to me that it could also be that she doesn't know how he's going to react at them revealing the fact that they know who he is.
True. That's true.
You know? And it could just be she's anticipating the worst and she doesn't get that. And so that's why maybe now when she says, she's finding it hard to believe that he's a famous cat burglar, that's the progression of her emotions there.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, he chuckles. He chuckles, calls himself a dog burglar, calling cats haughty creatures. He reveals that Doolittle is just the latest in a line of Doolittles that he employed in his work. Aww. And he tells Laura not to judge him. He tells Laura not to judge him too harshly. He's simply a person whose talents put him outside the law. Even though it was the government who trained him and for whom he'd worked during the war in undercover operations in Europe. But when the war was over, he just chose to stay on in England. Laura asks what happened to all the money he stole over the course of his career. And he takes that as being a passing reference to his current living conditions. And so he glances around the trailer and says, well, he spent it when he had it, but he's got no regrets. This place suits him fine. Nice neighborhood, pretty quiet. He tells her that gardening is his hobby now, attributing it to the time he lived in England. He points to Steele, grins, and says, you Brits really love your gardens, don't you? Brosnan's response here as Steele is interesting because he looks away, grabs the knot of his tie and starts playing with it. It's almost like he's uncomfortable about the comment.
What's funny too is in Britain, garden means more than one thing. Like if you say a garden here, I assume you mean a patch of dirt where you're growing crops, like either tomatoes or what have you. But in the UK, they use garden to mean their lawn. So they use it to mean like their backyard. We would say backyard. They would say garden. Or their front yard. We would say front yard. They would say garden. So if you are gardening, you are obviously growing things, but their garden is simply just their lawns.
Whole area.
Yeah, the whole area. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting why he would seem almost uncomfortable
it's weird
about the comment.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that he's Irish and not English.
Could be that. Yeah, and that could be a bit of a sore spot.
Yeah, could be. Anyway, Masters taps on the arm of the chair, gets up, takes a few steps and turns and says, well, I guess you have to turn me in now, right? And Steele somewhat conspiratorially asks, for what? The statute of limitations on the Cronenberg necklace ran out years ago. And Laura adds that she hasn't seen any evidence of wrongdoing that would be within their area of responsibility to report. Okay, this is it. This is the point. Okay, yes, the statute of limitations ran out on the theft of the Cronenberg necklace years ago.
Right.
But he still holds it. He still possesses it. That's an active crime. It's called being in possession of stolen property. That's an active crime that they could charge him with right now.
I guess, but it's one of those things where, similar to the small town Steele episode, he could easily wide-eyed, innocent retiree. Oh, I mean, it was an inheritance or something that, he could make up a story as to how he came across it, or he bought it in a pawn shop or something. And who's to say?
But I think this is one of the reasons, though, why he didn't admit who he was earlier, because once, if he admitted who he was, he could be arrested and charged with possession. Granted, it's probably not a huge prison sentence. They'd probably get a deferred sentence, maybe a large fine or some such thing, community service.
Right.
But he may be concerned that it opens up too many doors to other issues, like, I don't know, just, well, Blaylock for one, but also maybe, maybe civil lawsuits or something. You don't know what he's got in his past that this sort of information getting out there might open up and reveal to it.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess where I was coming from earlier was that he says the dog is the most important person, the most important. It's his faithful companion. Like, this is the only companion he has in his life. So you'd think that if it was at risk of him never seeing his dog again, he'd take the risk. I mean, they're not police, and he could say, listen, here's the truth. I need my dog back. And I don't know.
I think
you're right.
I think he's concerned about the notoriety, and that he was probably hoping that he could get the situation resolved without these things being revealed.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, even if nothing happens to him legally, there's the notoriety. So
yeah, he could have people showing up at his trailer wanting him, or trying to make him steal for him, or whatever else.
Yeah,
that's fair.
So anyway, Masters, realizing that they're turning something of a blind eye, thanks them for their questionable ethics. Laura, obtusely, from Kevin Masters' perspective, suggests that they just said she has a soft spot for charming men with mysterious pasts. And she looks rather pointedly at Steele as she says it, who finds her gaze a bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, of course, they still have the problem of Blaylock to deal with. Masters doesn't know what Blaylock would want with Doolittle, but he does know that whatever it is that Blaylock's trying to accomplish, he won't stop now. Well, it's still night. Mildred is at home getting things together for the bowling tournament. She puts her shoes in her bag and begins to zip it up when Blaylock comes up behind her, grabs her, covering her mouth and turning her face to the camera so we can see the fear on her face. He tells her that she's going to make a little phone call for him. Back at Kevin Masters' place, he's on the phone. Laura and Steele are still there, seated on the couch. We only hear Masters' side of the conversation, but we know that he's talking to Blaylock, who has made some sort of demands on him. When Masters says, well, what makes you think I'll do that, Blaylock? Then there's a pause, followed by Masters saying, hello, Mildred? Are you? And, of course, this gets Laura and Remington's attention.
Yeah.
There's another long pause in the conversation. Then Masters says, I get the point, Blaylock. 10 o'clock. Laura, somewhat rhetorically, I think, densely maybe, asks if Blaylock has Mildred, and Steele asks what Blaylock wants. Masters says that Blaylock wants the Jennings diamond, and if he doesn't get it by 10, he'll kill Mildred. Steele adds that, well, now they know what Blaylock has been wanting all this time. Laura adds that Blaylock has been intending to use Doolittle as leverage, but now his leverage is Mildred. Masters realizes that Blaylock must have tailed him, seen that he'd taken a liking to Mildred, and then realized that Mildred's life would be more of a motivation for Masters than a mere dog, or at least that was his supposition.
Yeah.
Steele asks Masters how Mildred sounded. Scared? Well, okay, that's kind of a dumb question there too, Steele.
Yeah. I guess he was probably asking more like, did she sound like she was hurt? But you're right, it's a bit of a vague way to say it.
Yeah. So anyway, Laura insists that they call the police, but Steele dissuades her, reminding her that Blaylock has already killed once today and that he's likely to do it again if provoked. And with a sense of challenged resignation, Masters quips that, well, he'd better get ready to come out of retirement. Well, Steele doesn't like that idea, saying that with all due respect, not even masters could pull this one off. And even if he does get into the gem exchange building, the diamond's in a case with a unique alarm system. Disturb the glass in any way, and you set the whole bloody thing off.
I like the fact that
I got an issue with
that. I like the fact that Steele is like aware of all of the security features on this diamond. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because Masters later reveals that he does these little thought exercises in his head of how I would steal this thing or that thing. Obviously, Steele's doing the same thing. This is his version of cheating at solitaire.
Yeah, well, I've got an issue with what he describes here, and we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Anyway, Masters says he doesn't see that he has any choice. Laura says that the whole idea is ludicrous because it's frankly impossible. Masters says no, he knows for a fact that it can be done. And even though he's retired, as you said, he has this way of keeping his mind active by giving himself mental assignments of solving tough heists. And then when he's worked out how to accomplish that one, all in his head, of course, he moves on to another. And the Jennings diamond was one of those assignments. Laura expresses amazement. Masters expresses a need for help to pull it off in the real world.
Yeah, she seems pretty excited.
And Steele obviously trying to stifle his enthusiasm, but just as obviously failing to do so.
Jumping up and down on each, like, foot to foot.
Please, Mommy, can I?
Can I play? Can I play? Can I play?
He says that it would be an honor to assist someone as gifted as Le Renard. And Laura gives Steele a slightly disapproving look. Yeah.
Yeah, she seems to go from being excited to do it, because she does seem excited, to the minute Steele expresses that it would be an honor to assist someone as gifted as Le Renard, and then she's like, you better keep yourself in check, mister. Little conscience on his shoulder there.
Anyway, it's still night. Laura, Steele, and Masters and Doolittle are on the roof of a building, which is across the street from the gem exchange.
Sorry.
Anyway, Steele takes a crossbow, fires a line attached to a bolt across, and manages to get the bolt to hit a metal pole.
I thought this was that spear gun. Again.
Because
isn't a crossbow smaller?
No. A spear gun is a straight line weapon, kind of like a rifle in that it's just a straight line. This has got the bow on it, so it's definitely a crossbow. But what I have a problem with is, first of all, he manages to hit a metal pole on the top of the gem exchange building with his first shot.
Yeah.
First shot. Clear across the street. A metal pole that's probably no more than 6 inches across. And he hits it first shot. And then, is there really any sort of material that would fuse a piece of metal to another piece of metal, like that is shown, that wouldn't have first reacted to the metal of the crossbow bolt, even before it got to the other side and impacted the metal bolt?
That's a good point.
I think some fictional creative licenses.
We hand wave this. Yeah.
Hand wave, yeah. And then, did you see that the line is simply tied around the bolt?
Yep.
There's no flange behind the knot. So as soon as any kind of tension was put on that line, it would just slip off the back of the bolt, dropping whatever or whomever's on it down to the street below. So yeah, I realize, okay, it's 1960s and there are 1980s. And they're not expecting anybody to look at these things in fine detail. But I mean, come on, guys, have a little bit of professional pride.
I don't know. I'm hand waving that one because it looked cool. That should be a quote for a T-shirt right there. I'm hand waving that one because it looked cool.
Anyway, Steele hooks up a trolley and rides over to the other side, followed by Laura, who seems to be okay with her height issues.
Yeah, she doesn't seem bothered by the fact that she's literally suspended above like a building. Yeah.
So on again, off again, issues with heights. Anyway, after they're over there, Masters sends Doolittle over, and Steele catches the dog, then hurriedly passes him off to Laura.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to have anything to do with that dog. And then as they wait for Masters to come across, Laura asks what they're going to do after they steal the diamond. Steele has no answer, so he gives her a non-answer.
You'd think they would have discussed this all, like, before they left the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on what part of that or how you're interpreting that question, because is she talking about, okay, we get the diamond now, how are we going to get out of the building? I think they would have talked about that part.
No, I think she's talking more about what they're going to do about Blaylock. But again, you'd think they would have to talk about that before they do the heist.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, after all, they first things first,
Yeah.
But Steele kind of hand waves it, saying that they'll just trap Blaylock into a web of his own devising. Well, Laura recognizes that Steele didn't really answer the question. And so she asks again, slightly different way, saying, any idea how they're going to do that? But again, Steele puts her off, saying, one thing at a time, okay? Or as W.C. Fields so famously put it, go away, kid, you're bothering me. After some hesitation, Masters begins his trip to come across from the other side. But partway through, he partially loses his grip, which seems to apply a brake to the trolley, stopping him mid-traverse. Masters is dangling by one arm. And interesting move here. Steele momentarily covers his eyes and turns his head away. I guess not wanting to watch.
Yeah.
Masters resecures his grip, releasing the brake, which allows him to complete the trip. Once he gets there, Laura expresses concern for his well-being, but he excuses it as just being a little grease on the glove. And Laura and Steele respectfully accept the obvious excuse without comment.
Yeah.
Masters attempts to unbolt the cover on the alarm system control box, but he drops the tool. Steele respectfully asks, may I? Masters acquiesces, saying that, it is a bit chilly, and maybe he just wore the wrong gloves, Fingers getting a bit stiff from the cold at the moment. But again, Laura and Steele say nothing about the obvious excuse. Steele opens the box and Masters instructs him on how to disable the alarm system. And we know he's successful because the red light goes dark and a green one comes on. Good job. Okay. Well, back at Mildred's apartment, Blaylock is standing over Mildred, who is sitting on the couch. He's looking at his watch and thinking out loud. He says, it must be well into it by now, and he picks up the phone to make a phone call. Somewhat incensed, Mildred asks, with a bit of defiance, what gives him the right to make another man steal for him? And this is kind of what you were alluding to earlier. Distracted by Mildred's query, he hangs up the phone and he begins to justify his actions with the declaration that that man destroyed his life. And then with growing intensity and aggravation, he rhetorically asks, do you know what it's like to have your name dragged through the mud? Have your colleagues shun you? To be the butt of newspaper reporters in their stupid little columns? I was a good investigator. I deserve better.
And on that level, I agree with him. Right? Like if it were if we're going for what he said there, 100%, he got treated poorly. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the murdering part and the part where he has kind of gone off the rails is the part where his character becomes the villain. But this is an interesting case study in a character who just did his job and really didn't deserve the punishment that he got for doing his job. And so there is a little bit of, I have a tiny bit of sympathy, not quite as much sympathy as I would have had, say, for J.D. Cannon's character in Steele in the News, who I feel his reasoning for crossing the line into murder was maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say valid because there's never a valid reason to kill people, but understandable in a sense. But this, you do feel a little bad for him.
Yeah, there's a difference, though, between what happened with these two characters, because in Steele in the News, Cannon's character, he was doing something that was terrible and wrong, and he knew it. And it's not that he thought he was doing something that was okay. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He was just out of control and couldn't prevent himself from doing it. Whereas here, Blaylock has just gone completely off the deep end, and he thinks that he is totally justified in anything that he does. So, yeah, there's a definite difference there between those two. So, anyway, Blaylock has picked up the phone receiver again, and he's dialing a phone number. And then after a moment, he speaks into the phone. Yes, Sergeant, this is Inspector Anatole Blaylock of Interpol. It might interest you to know that I've uncovered a plot to steal the Jennings diamond. Tonight. The Gem Exchange building. Yes, I thought your department might want to share the credit. I'll meet you there. And, of course, Mildred's confused. She thought he wanted Masters to steal for him. Blaylock finally displays the full extent of his Ahab complex, telling Mildred, do you think money can pay for the humiliation I've suffered? No. Tonight, when I announce to the world that Blaylock, the bumbler, the scapegoat, has unmasked the world's greatest thief of our time, caught him in the act, as it were, I shall have what I've lived for these past 5 years, my vindication. Mildred, thinking she holds a trump card, begins to warn him that he'll never get away with it. Masters will tell the police that Blaylock forced him into it.
Oh, Mildred.
And Blaylock moves closer to Mildred and tells her in a sinister tone that Masters will need her to back him up.
Yeah.
And missing the implied threat, she says, oh, she'll talk. Yes, she will talk. She'll sing a song that will put him away.
Yeah.
And she stops with the meaning of the malicious grin on Blaylock's face and the veiled meanings of his words suddenly hitting her.
Yep.
Suddenly, she's totally disinterested in what Masters what he does, what happens to him. And after all, what business is it of hers? She hardly knows the guy. Nah, she wouldn't talk. No skin off her nose. Boy, she's flexible, isn't she?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Blaylock stands up, pulls his gun from the front of his pants.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Careful with those bits.
Well, you know what? He's the doctor. Maybe he has an extra set. Like the doctor has 2 hearts. So I don't know. I haven't. There's a lot of fan fiction. To be
so
fair,
many images through the mind.
That.
So many images through the mind. Oh.
Maybe he's got a backup. Is all I'm saying.
Anyway. He can answer the front door and the back door at the same time. Anyway, there's the front door, and it's the dragon, and it's the dragon ladies. Blaylock orders her not to answer it, but she insists she has to. So Blaylock kind of compromises, warning her to get rid of them unless Mildred wants the other women to join her. He follows her as she moves to the door and stands behind the door hidden as Mildred tells the other women to, run on ahead without her. She has an emergency at the office to deal with. The women are confused. They start to protest. And Mildred, not really paying attention to what they have to say, asks them to do a favor for her on their way to the bowling alley. Pick up her bowling ball, telling them it's at the Claymore shop on Vermont. Now the women are really confused, repeating, the Claymore shop? Yes, on Vermont. Mildred hurriedly closes the door, after which Blaylock repeats his earlier demand that she get her coat. At the Gem Exchange, we see that the guards are out making their rounds. And then we see first Steele and then Laura climbing down a metal access ladder inside of a concrete-lined ventilation chute. We see Doolittle being lowered on a harness, followed by Masters, except that Masters' feet slip on the slick metal rungs of the ladder. He slides and falls down the ladder, finally landing with a sharp impact which injures his ankle so bad that he can't walk properly. Laura thinks they failed, but Masters says no. Doolittle is all they need. But Steele refuses to hear it. He's not taking that dog anywhere without Masters.
He does not like this idea.
No. But Masters evokes the Mildred situation as an overriding concern. He reminds Steele that they've gone over the voice commands, that Doolittle will obey, and that Steele and Laura will be in good hands. Doolittle snarls at Steele, who responds in kind.
He
Shades of his
growls
Russian
back.
wolfhound and stealing
I
the show.
I love it. It's great.
Yes.
It's great.
You know, Murphy would have enjoyed this.
I know. Murphy would have actually, I think, had a lot of fun with this one.
I think Murphy would have really liked Doolittle. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think Doolittle would have liked Murphy, much to Mr. Steele's chagrin. I think they would have gotten along well.
Yes. Anyway, Laura and Steele begin crawling through the ventilation tunnels in the building. And as they do so, Laura asks how they're going to get Masters out of the building once they've secured the diamond. But Steele deflects her question, reminding her that it's one thing at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time.
They arrive at the air vent grill, which is leading into the display vault for the diamond in question. And a guard comes in, prompting Steele and Laura to duck in an effort to ensure that they aren't seen through that grating. And then after the guard completes a security check by first placing, then removing a security card in one reader, then inserting and leaving it in a second reader on the far side of the room, he leaps through a door on that far side of the room. Laura then removes the ventilation grate and sets it on the floor. Steele and Laura both don glasses that reveal the lines of the laser light. They tell Doolittle to fetch, and he takes off toward the far wall where the security guard has inserted the card. And as he goes, Laura calls out instructions: slide, crawl, jump, guiding Doolittle around the laser beams to the card that the guard had placed in the reader on the far end of the wall. And once there, Laura directs Doolittle to pick it up and then to come home, back to them, and she again guides him around the lasers. But he doesn't complete the trip.
No.
Somehow he knows he's clear of the lasers, so he stops short and refuses to come any further, refusing to respond to their whispered pleas. Steele realizes that there's only one solution to the problem.
Yeah.
He turns around in the tunnel, dangles his leg out of the opening and calls, "Wookiees!" And of course, Doolittle responds, trotting over to Steele's foot and urinating on it.
I love Laura's expression. I love the look on her face. She's genuinely, this smile is just really, really sweet. Like, she's genuinely both amused and just kind of like enjoying herself. You know? That's good.
Yeah. I think to some degree she's enjoying his humiliation.
Yeah, exactly. She says he's an inspiration.
Well, she laughs, patting his knee, and as you said, declares him an inspiration. And Steele shakes the moisture off his foot, a disgusted look on his face.
Poor guy.
Doolittle stands on his back legs, letting Laura take the card. She slides it into the slot of the reader next to them, shutting off the lasers. Outside in the dark, we see a man in a car. And from the conspicuously nondescript look of the man and the conspicuously nondescript nature of the car, it's easy to guess that this is a police detective. He picks up a handheld radio from the seat beside him and speaks into it. Diamond 1 to Diamond 2, report, over. Another man, only slightly less conspicuously nondescript, responds, confirming that he's in position. The first man repeats the process, but this time to Diamond 3. And yet another man, again slightly less conspicuously nondescript than the first, responds, confirming that he's in position. Then we see Blaylock walking Mildred out toward the end of a long pier. This can't be good. Well, there's obviously work being done on the pier during the daytime hours because there's warning barriers placed around. It's strewn with piles of lumber, stacks of bags of concrete, and piles of sand. In an attempt to speed up the process, Blaylock gives Mildred a shove, causing her to fall down right onto one of those piles of sand. He points his gun at her and, with a threatening growl in his voice, orders her to get up. As she does, she grabs a handful of sand and throws it in Blaylock's face, getting some of it into his eyes. Having temporarily blinded Blaylock, Mildred runs off. At first, Blaylock blindly shoots at her, but fortunately misses her. Then, as Mildred begins to climb onto a ladder to climb down below the pier, Blaylock recovers his eyesight somewhat. He takes more shots, and in the distance, we see Mildred fall off the ladder and into the water.
So what you're saying is she took a long walk off a short pier.
She took a very long walk off of a moderately lengthy
Well, it doesn't
pier,
sound
yes.
as good to say it that way. Fine, whatever.
Anyway, Blaylock runs to the end of the pier and peers down.
The doctor's not very nice in this episode. I don't like it.
Did you get the joke?
I got it. Peers down.
Okay,
I got it.
Fine.
That's my Fox
Once
and the
again,
Hound
you're
joke
ignoring
was
my
better.
dad jokes. You're not doing my ego any good here. Anyway, he peers down, gun at the ready. The water's churned where Mildred entered, but there is no sign of her. Satisfied that he has eliminated his witness, he turns and walks back. In the gem exchange, Laura and Steele erect a tripod over the pedestal that is topped with the Jennings diamond, which is enclosed in a glass cube. And in the process, which I don't understand the point of, they adhere a suction cup to the top of the cube, and then the suction cup is attached to the cube, and then with the suction cup attached to the cube and the pedestal, they pull attached to the cube and attached to the tripod, they pull the pedestal out from under it. I thought that if they disturbed the glass, it would set off the alarm. Doesn't what they're doing really kind of constitute disturbing the glass, since disturbing the glass implies motion or vibration sensors? Either that or their sensors are very low grade, but that's really not how Steele seemed to describe them earlier. His description was any disturbance of the glass would set it off. And how does the alarm work? What sort of transmitter does the alarm in the cube have? I mean, how is it powered? There's no wires visible in the glass cube. There's no wires coming from the glass cube. Wi-Fi, as we know it, which is operated on fairly low power sources, hadn't been invented then. And based on the wireless technologies that I think were available at the time, there would have had to have been some sort of electricity to power a transmitter in the cube. Send signals. Hey, don't with the hand wave.
I was just going to say, what am I doing right now? Hand wave.
Don't with the hand wave.
Wookiees.
Again, a little bit of professional pride on the set designers and the prop makers. Okay,
I'm
even if nobody
because it
notices
looks cool.
Even if nobody notices it, I mean, you know.
I don't see. I totally bought all of this, so I think there's only a
okay. I'm the
handful
only
of...
one. I'm the only one that has a problem with it. Okay, fine, whatever.
Well, no, I just mean I don't necessarily. Maybe it's my lack of technical understanding of certain things, but like it wouldn't have occurred to me. Like to me in Magic TV Land, it's just got an alarm on it somewhere, and I don't know how, but it does because they said it does in the script, and that's kind of where my brain goes with that. But,
yeah, see, I would probably make a really bad prop designer or set designer, because I would look at this thing and say, no, that can't be. You can't have it that way. You've got to have it. And the director would be saying, but no, we've got to have it. And no, you can't, because it wouldn't work. Yeah, I'd probably get fired a lot.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Anyway,
they'd actually relegate you to playing the dead bodies in all the episodes. Let's get him to play a body. He's not going to talk, at least.
That's true. Unless I was the body in Clue. Then I would have a few lines. Yeah. So anyway, outside we see the Dragon Ladies. They're at the corner of Claremore and Vermont, and they are perplexed. There's clearly no pro shop here, only the gem exchange. And so they conclude that it's all a clue. After all, Mildred is a top operative. She wouldn't have sent them there without a good reason. They just have to figure out her clue. So they decide they need to reconnoiter. Well, we see Diamond 3 calling Diamond 1, reporting 3 middle-aged women out in front of the gem exchange, all wearing bowling shirts with Dragon Ladies written on the back. Inside, Steele has a torch, and he's working on cutting a hole out of the metal bottom of the glass cube. Laura is at the window doing something, though I'm not sure what, when she happens to look down and sees Mildred's bowling team on the sidewalk below. Then she sees Diamond 1 approach the women, and we can see that he pulls out his badge and shows it to them. And then he ushers them away from the front of the building. Steele has finished the job of cutting out the bottom of the cube. He reaches in, grabs the diamond, holds it out for Laura to see, and asks, what does she say to that? She tells him to put it back. It's a setup.
Yeah, and it's so funny because he's so proud of himself, right? He's cut the thing out. He's done everything that they've come there to do. And, hey, Laura, what do you think? I don't know. Put it back.
Yeah. It was all a tease. Yep. Anyway, down below, the Dragon Ladies are talking to Diamond One, explaining that there isn't any Claremore shop, so they interpret that to mean the corner of Claremore and Vermont. Now, the question is, but Diamond One has no time for this, and he tries to shoo them away. Just then, a pair of squad cars show up, and in annoyance, Diamond One wonders, now what? This has not been Diamond One's night.
No.
Uniformed officers get out of the car and begin walking toward the front of the gem exchange. Diamond 2 and 3 try to intercept them, but they tell them that they've gotten an emergency call. Diamond 1 rushes up, demanding from the uniformed officers an explanation, only to be told that some people got locked in the building accidentally. The old man's got a sprained ankle. One officer, who just magically happens to have a key to the front door of a building for which he has no business having a key.
I wondered about that.
Unlocks the door. Yeah. Laura, carrying Doolittle, Masters, and Steele come out of the building. The three Diamonds order them up against the wall, as Laura insists that there's a perfectly good explanation for all of this.
They've got coats over their crime clothes, but I think it's adorable that Doolittle got crime clothes. Got his little black sweater. Like, they did not need to dress the dog up. They did.
Well,
I think that's my favorite little addition to the episode was like, okay, well, we're going to do this, but first we need to get a doggy sweater for Doolittle. He can't go in without crime clothes.
Well, his fur is partially white. I mean, he's got mostly dark, but he's got white streaks in there. So,
And if you arrest them, what are they going to do? Put Doolittle in a lineup with like
no, but the dark sweater helps hide the white stripes, so it makes it less visible.
Okay, but now
see, there's logic to this.
Would it not be adorable to see like Blaylock standing there and looking at the lineup, and there's like a Labradoodle and a Great Dane, and then there's Doolittle, and there's like, all right, which canine was it?
Yeah, number 3, Bart.
Roof. Anyway, sorry. I realized I just derailed us, but that's an adorable scene, and I think it would be super cute.
Anyway, at this time, Blaylock comes striding up and congratulates Diamond One on having just arrested a world-famous thief. Steele turns around and begins to lunge at Blaylock, demanding to know what he's done with Mildred. But Diamond 3 grabs him and throws him back up against the wall. Blaylock tells Diamond 1 that if he checks Master's pocket, he's certain the officer will find the Jennings diamond. But Diamond 3, who's been patting down the trio, announces that they're clean. Diamond 1 insists that Blaylock tell him what he's on about. Blaylock insists Masters must have the diamond. He must. Steele turns and shouts, "This is the man you want, Lieutenant. He killed an Interpol agent." And just then, Mildred, still soaking wet, comes running up and yells, "Arrest this man!"
Which I'm sure she's wanted to do forever. Like, arrest this man. Like, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Well, Blaylock panics. He puts both his hands out, shoves everyone away, turns and runs. Kevin Masters grabs Doolittle from Laura, tosses him to the ground, and commands, "Tango!" Doolittle takes off after Blaylock, grabbing the end of his trousers, causing Blaylock to fall. Blaylock tries to pull out his gun, but as he does, Steele runs past him at full speed, kicking the gun out of his hands as he does. Diamond 2 and 3 haul Blaylock off, and Steele, watching on, admits that, well, perhaps that dog is good for something after all. Laura looks down and begins laughing and directs Steele's attention to his feet.
Yep.
He looks down, and then a look of disgusted annoyance crosses his face. We know what's happening.
Yep.
Back in the office, boy, I'm having trouble talking today. Back in the office, Masters and Doolittle are with Laura and Remington. He tells them that it's safe to say that the Fox is retired. Laura concurs, saying that now he won't have Blaylock to worry about, especially since, according to the police, his failure snapped him for good. Steele adds that Blaylock just sits in his cell repeating, "Le Renard, Le Renard." Masters asks how he could possibly ever thank them, and Steele suggests that, well, you could pick up my dry cleaning bill.
Yeah, right, because he's peed on how many custom suits at this point?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Well, I mean, presuming that Steele changed, because we're under the impression of that happened in one day, right? But I
would
wonder,
have changed.
And we obviously don't get any indication that they kept in touch, but I would have loved to have seen a scene between Steele and Masters where they sit down together and Steele basically says, "You're one of my heroes." Yeah, they swap stories, right? You stole this. You got there, 3 days before I did, man. That was on my list. I don't know. I just think that would be kind of cute because you got to wonder if he knows Daniel. It's probably small circles they run in, right? You'd have to, because they'd be about the same age. So you kind of wonder if they've crossed paths.
That's true.
Fan fiction writers,
okay,
get on it.
Anyway, Susan Claiborne walks in, smiling, eager, thinking they might need a little more help today. Behind her, Mildred walks in, declaring, "No way, Jose." The phone on Mildred's desk begins ringing. She answers it, puts it on hold, and then greets everyone. She is clearly pleased to be back at her old job.
She's back. Yep.
Yeah. Master says that he thought that they might have lunch together. She smiles and says, "Great. I only get an hour."
Since when?
Since when?
Since when? I knew you would have the same response to this, but I'm sorry. What? Since when does she only have an hour for lunch? We have seen on at least 2 separate occasions her saying, "Yeah, I'm going on a date. I'll be back when I'm back. Bye." So,
well, maybe she just said that as kind of, they only officially allow me an hour, so I'll just play along with it and say, yeah. I only get an hour. But yeah, we've got the rest of the afternoon for the most part. As long as I check in long enough to clock out, by the end of the day, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, she takes the call off hold and begins talking to the person on the other end. "Yes? No, I'm afraid that won't do. When we order canary yellow pads, we expect canary yellow pads. Let me speak to your supervisor, please." Laura begins to laugh, and Steele has a knowing smile on his face. Susan Claiborne looks at Steele, confused, and asks, "I thought you said she was a very important part of this agency." And Steele nods his head and matter-of-factly says, "She is, Mrs. Claiborne. She is." And he gives Mildred a wink.
Yeah.
And there we are.
I like it. I like this whole episode. This is one of my favorites. I think it's really fun.
Yeah. It's very, very fun. It's got, a few minor little quibbles that I'll take with it, but yeah, all in all, it's a really good episode.
Yeah. And you can't go wrong with pretty much anything J.D. Cannon shows up in. He sort of elevates in a way that I really enjoy. And Tom Baker is a huge get for the show because, he might not have been well known in America, but in the UK, he was a big deal. Right?
Was he still the doctor at that time?
He might have just finished his run as the doctor because he wasn't, because I believe in the 80s was Sylvester McCoy, and he came around towards I think either Colin Baker or Peter Davidson was probably the doctor at that point. I'd had to look it up, but yeah, he wasn't the doctor anymore. But Tom Baker was known; he was a known actor, and to get somebody that big in Britain, I kind of have to wonder what he was doing in America because he was predominantly a British actor that acted in British productions. So I wonder if either Brosnan knew him or, it was just such a sort of bizarre.
Well, obviously they needed an English actor because that's what the character called for. So yeah, it could be that somebody knew somebody who knew somebody. I'm not sure that.
Yeah, sorry. His last appearance, I just looked it up, as the Doctor was in a special in 1981, but his run as the Doctor went from 1974 onwards. So yeah, he wouldn't have been the Doctor anymore, but he would have still been well known enough that people would see him and go, "Oh my God, it's the Doctor!"
Yeah.
Which hence the wink and the.
I don't know if Brosnan would have necessarily known him because Brosnan came over an unknown.
True.
He did Manions of America, and he didn't really have a reputation at this point. I mean, at the point that he came over. So, I mean, it's possible he knew Baker, but I'm going to say it's probably more likely that somebody else knew Baker or they had seen Baker's work somehow and thought, he'd be good.
He does play a wonderfully unhinged character, and he's very theatrical with it because, of course, Doctor Who was a very sort of theatrical science fiction-y type show. So you've got two really good guest stars in this episode that kind of make it fun to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I enjoyed it.
Did you notice what was not in this episode?
No, what are we missing?
A movie reference.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. The Fox and the Hound.
No. That's you making stuff up.
Yeah, you're right. There wasn't an official movie reference in the episode. Yeah. So
anyway, okay. Well, if that's it, remind everybody that we have a website. It's www.SteeleWatching.com. And there you can find all the episodes listed so you can listen online. You'll find show notes, links to, no Amazon links, not this week. So no Amazon link, but links to other resources such as
our Facebook. Sorry, my brain
just
blanked. Wow. I don't know how that happened. Our Facebook, we've got our Facebook page, our Twitter, as well as our Instagram page. There it is. Wow. The knowledge just came flooding back. Yeah. Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as the officially unofficial Facebook group, Steele Watchers on Facebook, which is, again, not our group. We don't run it or anything, but we all hang out there and we talk about stuff, and it's usually a lot of fun. So join us.
All right. You will be in charge in the next one. Elementary Steele.
Season finale.
Yeah. Another good one.
It is. It is. All right. Well.
Okay. I guess that's it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating? Yes,
every single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.SteeleWatching.com to sign up.